Most people know they need a will, but they don't understand the benefits and misconceptions of a trust. Today we'll break down the differences between the two and the key criteria in making the decision for yourself, making sure that your family is set up for success and know that your wishes are carried out. Finally, I'll share the common mistakes people make when comparing a trust versus a will and how to avoid them. My name is Garrett Dresen. I'm a certified financial planner and I've helped hundreds of families and business owners with their financial planning needs. And part of that is estate planning, so deciding between a will versus a trust. So I've seen firsthand how, families are when they do have a proper estate plan and when they don't too, when that goes wrong. Let's dive in. First thing I wanted to talk about is, what happens if you don't have a plan? So this is the cost of inaction here. And one of the most terrifying things to me is, the court decides for you. So if you don't have a plan in place, then someone else will decide for you. And how that works is the state will determine who inherits your assets, or if you have a child, who the guardian would be of your child. And of course, if you don't have a plan, more family stress, more conflict. Last thing you want is loved ones fighting over assets or decisions if you were to pass away. And then delays, of course, in the process. So it would take longer for your heirs to get your assets and typically increase fees as well. So probate can take months or years and just eat into the cost. And business risk too. So I do a lot of work for business owners and do exit planning. And, that really puts your business at risk if you don't have a personal estate plan as well. So there, wouldn't be a clear successor to your business. And, a lot of businesses, they stall, definitely be losing revenue and, probably be sold for pennies on the dollar, like a liquidation sale. And then not to mention missed opportunities too. So no tax planning, no control over timing, and no flexibility. So these are the costs of inaction here. So big cost to pay for just not having a basic plan. And then, so what I wanted to cover too, what a will is. So it's a legal document that directs who gets what after death, and then also can name guardians for minor children as well. So, you don't want crazy Aunt Sally to have guardianship of your kids. You want Aunt Susie to have the guardianship of the kids, right? You want to be able to choose. And then a will go through probate as well. So this is a court process. So it does take time. So it's something to be aware of. And then it's also public record as well. So, all this information would be public knowledge too. And then we're going to be talking about revocable living trusts today. There's many types of trusts, but we're really going to focus on the revocable living trust. It's the more simple of all the trusts out there. So a revocable living trust is a legal entity that holds assets for beneficiaries. And, it can be used during your lifetime and after death as well. And a benefit of the trust is it avoids probate. It's private as well. So, the will, all that would be public information. Trust would be private, and it's often a lot faster too. So a faster transition from when you pass to your heirs. And one of the best benefits is it offers more control as well. So over timing and conditions too. So if you have a son that's 18 and you can put in your trust that you don't want him to inherit anything until he's 25, or you can do 50%, and based on certain metrics, he gets the last 50%. So you can really control things from the grave if that's what you're looking to do. And then taxes and revocable trusts. So there's a lot of misconceptions around this, so I just wanted to touch on it. There's no direct tax savings for having a revocable living trust, and no income tax differences, no estate tax treatment is different, and it's just the same as if it was in your name. And all the income on the trust too, it still reports on your personal return, as long as it's a revocable trust and it's a grantor trust is what it's called. And you still get a full step up in basis with assets under the trust, so that helps heirs reduce capital gains when they're selling things. And then it's included in your taxable estate too. So if you're looking at your total estate, it's still included in that. So it's not like as big and scary as a lot of people make it sound to be. And it's really, the foundation for future tax planning. I'll talk about some more advanced tax planning strategies that you can do. But your attorney can also layer in like a marital trust and charitable trust later as well. And then, so another thing I just wanted to point out too is, revocable trusts aren't designed to save taxes. They're meant to save time and then, less stress and less court involvement too. And, those benefits we talked about before, the control. And if you are looking for more tax planning trust strategies, this is like a whole separate topic in itself, but a lot of revocable living trusts. You can implement, bypass trust, charitable, and gifting strategies too. So, if you're working with a planner, then a gifting strategy, if you're trying to reduce your estate taxes, that's definitely something you'd want to look into. You want to make sure that you're still set up financially to be able to gift to your heirs and not put yourself in a bad position. So there's a fine balance there, but just things to consider for tax planning. And then family limited partnerships too. Those are things that you can look into. And then, it's really important to coordinate with your CPA, with your financial planner, with your estate planning attorney when talking about like really looking for tax planning and estate tax planning strategies. And here are just a few key differences that we talked about. So will, a little bit more simple, of course, way more inexpensive to set up. Trusts are going to have more upfront costs and more complexity. And, probate's going to be required in the will. The trust avoids probate. Will is public record, so privacy is something that's really important. You might want to move toward the trust. Trust is a lot more private. And then the control too. The will is pretty straightforward. Like, hey, I want these people to have my assets, and it just goes to them, right? And then the trust, you can really control things. And then when to consider a will as well. So for smaller estates, just having just the basic will, typically just makes the most sense. It's not worth the complexity for people's situations. And then if families like really want to keep costs low, but you just want to be careful that you're not stepping over those dollars to save pennies as well. And then young adults just starting out. So everyone should have a will and, basic estate plan, healthcare directive, financial power of attorney when they're just starting out too. And then when to consider a trust. So larger estates, if you have a business, you really want to, if you have a substantial business, you want to be able to make sure you have a trust, and, just more complicated situations typically want a trust. And desire for privacy, as we talked about. Blended families too are a really great reason to consider a trust. There's all sorts of things that you can do. It's that control piece again. So if you have a blended family, when one spouse passes, you can make that trust so it doesn't change, right? So that other spouse that's left couldn't make changes to the other assets. So all sorts of things you can do. And then special needs beneficiaries, of course, too, definitely a reason to consider a trust. And then if you want more control over how the heirs inherit your funds. Common mistakes. So, assuming a will avoids probate, I hear that a lot, and that is not true. Creating a trust but not funding it. So you will have to retitle your assets in the trust. If you work with an estate planning attorney to do your trust, which I always recommend, they'll typically help you with like putting your home in the trust, but it's a lot of times it's up to you to put like your brokerage accounts and your bank accounts into the trust. So you really have to keep on top of it. So this is where the complexity of the trust comes in. You want to make sure you're really on top of it. And then not updating documents after life changes too. I always, want my clients to check in with their estate planning attorney, and always encourage them to check in after when life changes too. And then thinking estate planning is set it and forget it. You don't want to just set this up and leave it for 20 years and never touch it. I always say like checking in every 5 years at least, just in case things change. Sometimes state laws change, so you just really want to be on top of that. And then a recap, kind of what we talked about, and some steps as well. So making sure you at least have a basic will. Something is better than nothing, so at least you have a plan. And then if privacy, control, and avoiding the probate matters to you, consider that revocable living trust. And then working with your certified financial planner, attorney, CPA to ensure all your documents are aligned. It should be a team approach and a cohesive approach with your overall financial plan.